Hello folks, my name is Garen Shepherd and I'm a practicing counsellor here in the UK. I have 6 years postgrad training. I work with various people with various mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, as well as addictions. I also work with people with relationship breakdowns, and also I work with people with loss, whether that's with a loved one who's passed away, a relationship breakdown, and I work with people in ways of helping them build themselves back up and go through various types of stages of grief and hopefully help them process a loss. Unfortunately, as we know, loss comes to us all eventually, and we do pass away. So if your loved one is dealing with a loss currently, it can be helpful to learn more about the grieving process. Here I'm going to share 5 stages of grief with you, along with a few ways to help you and hopefully help you in regards to your grief after a death or a breakup. It's important to remember that the grieving process can be quite complex. It isn't the same for everybody. The steps may not be followed exactly, or other feelings may surface after you thought you were through particular stages of grieving. Allow some room to experience in your own way, which can help you heal after your loss. So what are the 5 stages of grief? The 5 stages of grief is a theory developed by the psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which she suggests that if we go through 5 stages through the grieving process, which are distinct stages after the loss of a loved one. These stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. So we'll start with denial. In the first stages of grieving process, denial helps us minimize the overwhelming pain of a loss. And as we process the reality of our loss, we are also trying to survive emotional pain. And it can be really hard to believe that we've lost such an important person in our lives, especially when we may just have spoken to them recently or the previous day. And this can be really, really difficult, and you can be shocked with that first moment of not knowing they're there. If you pick up your phone, you can't ring them, and it can be a really difficult process because you've had a habit of contacting this person and no longer. Unfortunately, they're no longer here. So during this stage of grieving, our reality has shifted completely. It can take our minds time to adjust to our new reality. We reflect on the experiences we've shared with the person we lost, and we must find ourselves wondering how to move forward in life without this person. This is a lot of information to explore and a lot of painful imagery to process. Denial attempts to slow this process down, and it takes us through it one step at a time, rather than risk the potential of feeling overwhelmed by our emotions. And denial is not only an attempt to pretend that the loss does not exist, we are also trying to absorb and understand what's happening. Because it's great trauma when we have a loss, where somebody's there and then they're no longer. So do remember, when we can go through this first part of the process, it can be a shock. And it is okay to express any emotions, our feelings, and make sure you've got a good surrounding of people in that time to comfort you and help guide you through this and give you some support. The second stage in grieving is anger. We are trying to adjust to a new reality and are likely experiencing extreme emotional discomfort. There is so much to process that anger may feel like it allows us an emotional outlet. But keep in mind that anger does not require us to be vulnerable. However, it may feel more socially acceptable and admitting that we are scared. Anger allows us to express emotions with less fear of judgment or rejection. And anger also tends to be the first thing we feel when we start to release emotions related to loss. This can leave us feeling isolated in our own experience. It can also cause us to perceive unapproachable by others in the moment, when we could benefit from comfort, connection, as well as reassurance. Also, when coping with loss, we go through the bargaining stages, and this isn't unusual to feel desperate that you are willing to do anything to alleviate or minimise this pain. During this stage in grieving, you may try to bargain to change the situation, agreeing to do something in return for being relieved of your pain you feel. And also, when bargaining starts to take place, we direct our requests to a higher power or something bigger that may be able to influence a different outcome. Bargaining during the grieving process can come from a variety of promises, including, God, if you can heal this person, I will turn my life around. I promise to be better if you let this person live. I'll never get angry if you can stop him or her dying or leaving me. And there's an acute awareness of humanness in this stage of grieving, when we realise there is nothing we can do to influence, change or create a better end result. Bargaining tends to come from a feeling of helplessness and gives us a perceived sense of control over something that feels totally out of control. During bargaining, we tend to focus on our personal faults or regrets. We might look back at our intentions with the person we are losing and note all the times we felt disconnected or we may have caused them pain. It's common to recall times when we may have said things that we did not mean or wish we could go back and behave differently. We also sometimes make the drastic assumption that if things had played out differently, we would not be in such an emotional, painful place within our lives. During our experience of processing grief, there comes another time when our imagination cuts down and we slowly start to look at reality of our present situation. Bargaining no longer feels like an option and we are faced with what is happening. And depression, in this stage of grieving, we start to feel a loss of our loved ones more abundantly. Our panic begins to subside and emotional fog begins to clear. The loss feels more present and more unavoidable. In these moments, we tend to pull inwards as the sadness grows. We might find ourselves retreating, being less sociable, and reaching out less to others about what we are going through. Although this is a very natural stage in grieving process, dealing with depression after a lost or loved one is extremely isolating and can be one of the most difficult stages, especially when you do go into that, kind of depression bubble, as I call it, and hide away in your comfort zone. And it's really hard sometimes to pull yourself out of that. The last stage of the 5 stages of grief is a key part, which I normally use in a hell of a lot of my therapy work, is acceptance. It can be a really hard pill to swallow. And when I mean acceptance, I'm not saying, okay, it's fine, get over it. It is more of accepting that there's nothing you can change about this. When we come to a place of acceptance, it's not that we no longer feel the pain of loss. Instead, we are no longer resisting the reality of our situation, and we are not struggling to make something different. Sadness and regret can still be present in this phase, but the emotional survival tactics of denial, bargaining, and anger are less likely to be present during this phase of grieving process. There's no really specific time period for any of these stages. One person may experience the stages quickly, such as a matter of weeks, while the other person may take months or even years to move through the stages of grief. Whatever time it takes you to move through these stages is perfectly normal. As I consider the 5 stages of grief, it's important to note that people grieve differently. So you may or may not go through these stages or experience them in order. The lines of grieving process stages are even blurred sometimes. We may also move from one stage to another and possibly back again before fully moving to the new stage, and this is fine. Life is all about trial and error, and if a certain stage doesn't quite work for you or you're not ready, just remember it is okay to stay back. And remember, your pain is unique to you. Your relationship to the person you lost is unique, and the emotional process can feel different to each person. Take the time you need to remove any expectations of how you should be performing as you work through the grieving process. Although the 5 stages of grief developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is considered one of the most easy recognisable models of grief and bereavement, there are other models to be considered as well. Each one seeks to explain how grief may be perceived and processed. These models can provide a greater understanding to people who are hurting over a loss or a loved one. They can also be used in the healing professions, helping them to provide effective care for grieving people who are seeking informed guidance. One of my favourite psychologists, legendary as I say, John Bowlby, focused his work on research with the emotional attachment between parent and child. And from his perspective, early stages of attachment with important people in our lives, such as caregivers, to help shape our sense of safety, security and connections. The British psychiatrist Colin Murray Parkes develops a model of grief based on Bowlby's theory of attachment, suggesting there are 4 stages of mourning when experiencing the loss of a loved one. His stages are as follows: shock and numbness. Loss in this phase feels impossible to accept. Most closely related to Kubler-Ross's stages of denial, we are overwhelmed when we're trying to cope with our emotions. Parkes suggests that there is physical distress experienced in these phases as well, which can lead to somatic or physical symptoms. Yearning and searching. As we process a loss in this phase of grief, we may look for comfort to fill void our loved one has left. We may do this by relieving memories through pictures, looking for signs from a person to feel connected with them. In this phase, we become very preoccupied with the person we have lost. Despair and disorganisation. We may find ourselves questioning and feeling angry in this phase. The realisation that our loved one is not returning feels real, and we can have a difficult time understanding or finding hope in our future. We may feel a bit aimless during this portion of the grieving process and retreat from others as we process our pain. And reorganisation and recovery. In this phase, we feel more hopeful that our hearts and minds can be restored. As with Kubler-Ross's acceptance stage, sadness or longing for our loved one doesn't disappear. However, we can move forwards and towards healing and reconnecting with others for support, finding small ways to reestablish some normalcy back into our daily lives, and it's learning to get back into that routine. Again, this takes time, and it is okay to have good days and bad days. That is part of the acceptance, which is key in this process. Some suggested that there's 7 stages of grief instead of only 4 or 5. This can get more complex model of grieving process involves experiencing. So shock and denial, they can go through the stages, whether loss occurs suddenly, with someone advance notice. It's possible to experience shock, you feel emotionally numb and may deny the loss. Pain and guilt. During this stage in grieving, the pain of the loss starts to set in. You may feel guilty for needing more from family and friends during this time. Anger and bargaining. Again, you may lash out at people you love or become angry with yourself, or you might try to strike a bargain with a higher power, asking that the loss be taken away in exchange for something on your part. Depression and loneliness. As you reflect on your loss, you may start feeling depressed or lonely. In this stage, in grieving, that you begin to truly realise the reality of your loss. And we have the upward turn. You begin to adjust your new life, and the intensity of your pain you feel from the loss starts to eventually reduce. At this point in the grieving process, you may notice that you feel a bit more calmer. Reconstruction and working through. This stage in grieving involves taking action to move forward. You begin to reconstruct your normal working life, and you start working through any issues created by that loss. And again, key part of this, which is acceptance and hope. In this final stage of the grieving process, you begin to accept the loss and feel hope for what tomorrow might bring. It's not all that all your feelings are gone, just more that you've accepted them and ready to move on. So to be able to help someone who's grieving, it can be difficult and able to say when someone has experienced loss. We do our best to offer comfort, but sometimes our best efforts can feel a little bit inadequate and unhelpful. Hopefully some of these techniques might help you support somebody going through this, or even possibly help yourself. So here's a few tips to keep in mind if someone you love is going through the stages of grieving. So I do tend to say to people, avoid rescuing or fixing. So in an attempt to be helpful, we may offer uplifting, hopeful comments or even humour to try and ease the pain or fix them. Although the intention is good, this approach can leave people feeling as if their pain is not seen, heard or valid. I do tend to use humour sometimes in particular situations myself, but sometimes it's just kind of treading carefully because that person may not be ready to receive that and be able to actually reflect on it and go through that stages of accepting that side of things. Definitely don't force it. We may want to so badly help that person to feel better, so we believe that nudging them to talk and process their emotions before they're truly really ready to help them faster. This is not necessarily true and can actually be an obstacle to their healing and really make them go into their, sometimes as I call it, our depression bubble and our comfort zone, and it can be really hard to pull us out there. So try not to force it. You know what's best for this person. Every individual knows what's best for them at the end of the day. And make yourself accessible. Offer space for people to grieve. This lets a person know we're available when they're ready. We can invite them to talk with us, but remember to provide understanding and validation. If they're not ready yet, remind them that you're there and not to hesitate, to come to you if they need that support. There's several organisations and information assisting people going through grieving process, regardless of the stages you're grieving in, and you may find help. There is different places like the Hope for the Bereaved, Compassionate Friends, as well as grief.com. There's all sorts of workshops and access to free sort of resources there. Also as well, if you're having a tough time, you can always call up the Samaritans here in the UK and they can give you support. And also, it's important to remember that everyone copes with loss differently. While you may experience all the 5 stages of grief, you might also find that it's difficult to classify your feelings into any one of the stages. Have patience with yourself and your feelings in dealing with loss. And also allow yourself time to process all your emotions, and when you are ready, speak about your experience with loved ones or a healthcare professional, a therapist, speak to your GP, any mental health nurses. And also, please do that. It takes a brave person to take that step to seek out support than a person walking around pretending everything's right. It can be really hard, but it can be such a brave move and really help you progress through the stages you're stuck on. And also, if you're supporting someone who's lost a loved one, such as a spouse or sibling, remember that you don't need to do anything specific. Just simply allow them room to talk when they are ready. So if you'll be interested to have a speak with myself, you can always contact me through my YouTube channel, or if not, you can contact me through my website, which is GarenGreenTherapies.com, and I'll have the information of that on my link below. And hopefully some of this information may have been informative to you, and no matter what you're going through currently at the moment, things do get better, you do grow, your resilience builds. But always remember the memories you had with that person, the good memories, and unfortunately we can't bring them with them when they're gone. But what we can do is that we can grow, we can build our resilience, we can accept this happened, but at the same time we acknowledge the good times. So take care, plenty of self-care, and be safe.